So we actually finally got the roadmap for GPT-5. And the reason I'm actually really excited to be recording this video is because for once, we're actually not getting a bunch of random speculative information. We're actually getting the entire GPT-5 roadmap laid out for us to completely understand. So let's not waste any time and dive into exactly how GPT-5 will be deployed, because it does offer us some rather interesting information that goes to show how these future AI systems will be. And I actually do agree with this. And I think this is how most AI systems will be when it comes to major chatbot providers. So you can see a few hours ago, Sam Altman tweeted that this is going to be the official roadmap update for GPT 4.5 and GPT 5. And he says that he wants to do a better job of sharing the intended roadmap and much better job at simplifying the product offerings. He said that, he wants AI to just work for you and it realize how complicated the model and product offerings have gotten. So basically, what they're talking about is the fact that if you've ever used ChatGPT before and you're someone that is using it, and you've got a lot of money invested, and by that I mean, let's say, for example, you're paying for the highest tier, ChatGPT currently is a complete mess. Now, I'm going to show you guys exactly what I mean by that. So when you come into ChatGPT, it does seem pretty simple, but when you do this drop-down menu right here, you can see that unfortunately, as someone who has a different layout to you probably do, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 GPT-4 mini and 8 GPT-4 and 9 if you include the temporary chat. Basically, the problem with this is that this causes analysis paralysis. And what this does involve is that this involves users' decisions. So, for example, when someone comes to use the AI chatbot, they genuinely don't know which model is the best, because you've got GPT-4o for questions, GPT-4o scheduled, O1, O3 mini high, O3 mini, O1 pro mode. You've got basically too many choices. And one thing that they constantly say in product choices is that if you have too many choices, your product is going to fail. And in this instance, for ChatGPT, what they want to do is they actually want to simplify this entire thing here, because this is far too complex for the average person to use. As someone that knows exactly what I'm going to be doing for every task, for me, this is just fine. But for the average person, this is actually a detriment and isn't actually a good thing. So they're actually going to change this in a really interesting way, which I will talk about later. And this is where they actually talk about how they hate the model picker as much as we do and want to return to magic unified intelligence. So I do think that one of the approaches that they're going to take to sort of return to this unified machine intelligence is through the router LLM. So basically, this was, I wouldn't say a framework, but this is basically how you set up LLMs in order to basically make things a lot easier. So you would have your single system prompt, your user prompt, actually, not the system prompt, your user prompt. So for example, you might put what's the weather today, and then there's basically a router that analyzes every single prompt that is put in. So this router will look at your question that you put in, it will analyze the cost, the latency, and basically it will look at your question and think, okay, does this question need to be routed to a really difficult model, or does this question need to be routed to a super easy model that I can answer within 2 seconds? If it is a hard question, it's going to be put towards the most intensive LLM, the one that's going to think for very long periods of time. And if it's something very simple, like, which came first, the chicken or the egg, it's going to be routed to a very simple model. And then, of course, finally, you get a system response. Now, this is something that they have tested before, maybe not OpenAI, but I do know other companies have tested something like Route LLM before, and it has gone very well, considering the fact that I think it dropped costs by around 85%. And you can read more about this at this blog post, Route LLM, an open source framework for cost-effective LLM routing, and basically just talks about how in their routing setup, they focus on the case where there are two models, a stronger, more expensive model, and a weaker but cheaper model. And their aim was to minimize costs while achieving high quality between routing through two models. And you can see right here that they said a top goal for us is to unify the O series models and GPT series by creating systems that can use all our tools, know when to think for a long time or not, and generally be useful for a wide range of tasks. So like I was talking about the previous framework, Route LLM, it's quite likely that we will have a situation on our hands where we do get a system that is basically all in one. And it's quite likely that we're going to get future models as an all-in-one system. So whilst, yes, there might be, parts of the system that are O3 mini and O3, high or whatever, it seems like we're basically moving towards one giant model or, orchestrated set of LLMs that basically provide you with this unified level of intelligence. And it's quite likely that, depending on your tier, you will have access to, those levels of intelligence. So maybe if you're paying $200 a month, you get access to the model's entire brain, all the, advanced reasoning capabilities. But if you're just a free user, you can maybe query it about one or two things a day, maybe just 10 to 20 queries a day. And that is going to be how the model is probably deployed, because it's, a lot easier to do that rather than having 6 different models. And then when, different companies come out with different models, they're like, okay, this model is clearly better, but this is probably going to be a lot better for OpenAI in terms of their branding. And they also state that, in the chat GPT and, in their API, they're actually going to release GPT-5 as a system that integrates a lot of their technology, including O3, okay? And they said that they're no longer going to ship O3 as a standalone model. So it's clear that GPT-5 is probably going to absorb O3 as just part of its, architecture. And it's going to be, I guess you could say, part of that model for quite, some time. So it's like GPT-5 is probably going to be a system that compromises of maybe O3, O1, different parts for different questions, which is going to be super interesting to see how that, entire system works. And something that they also said here, that Sam Altman said, that I think super interesting, is that he said that GPT-5 as a system, okay, he said it's going to integrate a lot of our technology. And I don't know if this includes everything that we currently have, because there was one time that Sam Altman said that, this year, they are going to be releasing something that nobody has even thought of yet. And I think that is going to be super interesting. So I'm guessing that GPT-5 is probably going to be also, a computer agent. I'm guessing that they're probably going to wrap the name underneath that, because that is what makes sense. So that does intrigue me a lot, because I'm thinking, what on earth, is like the final version of GPT-5 going to be? Because I know that the model is really smart. But they also did say that, they're going to ship the next, chip GPT-5. They also said that, we will next ship GPT 4.5, the model we called Orion internally, as our last non-chain of thought model. So what they mean by this is that the last model that they basically did the old method of training, where, you basically collect a bunch of data, put all that data in the model, train it, then have the post-training, the fine-tuning, and all of those things that you have for a standard model output, like a GPT-4, a GPT-4o, all of those things basically are going to go in the last model. So it's clear, like I said before, we are on a new paradigm of training these models, and it's clear that the GPT 4.5 is probably going to be, this is just my best guess, it's probably going to be on the level of Claude 3.5 Sonnet, but probably a lot better than that. Probably not a lot better, probably marginally better, because Claude 3.5 Sonnet is just so good. But I'm guessing it's going to be qualitatively better because, whilst, other models do surpass Claude 3.5 on benchmarks, internally, when you use a model like Claude, it just seems so much smarter, and it just always seems like it actually knows what's going on. So I'm thinking that OpenAI's aim is to probably just edge out Claude 3.6 Sonnet. And I think they will be able to do that with GPT 4.5, which is the model they called Orion internally, which they knew was smart. But I'm guessing the reason why they didn't deploy this before, which most people were wondering, and they actually spoke about this in an article before, was basically the fact that the model, it just cost too much in terms of inference. So they couldn't serve the model yet. But we do know that as time passes, inference consistently drops. If you remember yesterday's video, we spoke about how Sam Altman, he speaks about how like literally every 12 months, the price of LLMs drops by around 10x. So it's quite likely that in the past few months, okay, since they've managed to train this model and do all the safety testing, the price of inference has dropped to the point where it's going to be reasonable so that they can release this model. Now, if we do talk about, the estimated time of arrival, when is this model going to come? We have weeks and months. This is what Chubby said, any ETA for GPT 4.5 or GPT-5. So for GPT 4.5, it will be likely coming in the next coming weeks. So I'm suspecting by the end of March that we would have GPT 4.5. And for GPT-5, I'm guessing maybe by the end of Q2 or maybe by the end of Q3. But that is just my very best guess. So for that, in terms of timeframes, if you want to think, okay, when are these next models coming out? That is going to be that aspect of that area. So for me, that's what I do think in terms of where that is going to be. Now, of course, for free users, they actually talk about, the free tier of ChatGPT is going to get unlimited chat access to GPT-5 at the standard intelligence setting. Note standard intelligence. And this is, of course, not the high intelligence. So it isn't going to be, like O3 mini high. So it's not going to be accessing the long chains of thought that are at the threshold of, the most intelligence that we could currently access. But it does seem like this is a move because with DeepSeek, they basically just gave away, crazy level intelligence at a fraction of the cost. And it basically made it more cost effective for people to use DeepSeek than anything else, which is really, really intriguing. So, we can also see that they also talk about, the fact that Plus subscribers are going to be able to run GPT-5 at a higher level of intelligence. I'm guessing having the model to think more and, of course, tap into those long chains of thought that provide you with deeper insights to your queries. And it says Pro subscribers will be able to run GPT-5 at an even higher level of intelligence, and these models will incorporate voice, canvas, search, deep research, and more. So I think what OpenAI are doing are basically saying, look, if you want access to our free models, you are going to get that for free. But if you want access to, voice, canvas, search, and deep research, you're going to have to probably pay the highest level, which is probably around $200 a month. And I know that does seem quite expensive, but I think what OpenAI are banking on is that every single time they release something, they're basically just going to add it to GPT-5 as a system. So overall, as the system gets smarter and smarter and smarter, what you're paying for essentially goes down and down and down, if that does make sense. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how the pricing works. OpenAI have discussed pay-per-usage pricing because, of course, $200 a month is absolutely insane. I don't think anyone I know personally could get that much value out of the model, but it definitely is something that people will be doing. So I also do think that something that was super interesting was, will you be smarter than GPT-5? And this is where Sam Altman actually talks about the fact that, he doesn't even think he will be smarter than GPT-5.
How many people feel smarter than GPT-4? Okay, how many of you think you're still going to be smarter than GPT-5?
I was expecting more hands here.
I don't think I'm going to be smarter than GPT-5, and I don't feel sad about it because I think it just means that we'll be able to use it to do incredible things. And, we want more science to get done. We want to enable researchers to do things they couldn't do before. This is like the long history of humanity. It does feel a little different this time because of what this can enable. But if scientists can do things because they have like a crazy high IQ tool and they can focus more on figuring out the right questions to ask, address things quicker, do their search space faster, that's just a win for all of us. So we're thrilled to get to enable.
So with all of that being said, what do you guys think about GPT-5? Are you excited? I think I'm excited for the unified intelligence. I think this is something that actually makes sense. Unifying these models into one entire thing just makes so much sense in terms of the work you're trying to do and the simplicity of the model. There was a famous example in marketing that you guys might not actually know about, but just take this as a business lesson, where there was a jam store. And basically with this jam store, they had two stores. They had one that had 24 choices of jam, another one that had 6 choices of jam. And then in the 24 choices, you'd think that because there were more choices, more people would be buying because they're offering more services, but only 3% of people actually bought. But when they had 6 choices of jam, 30% of people bought. And basically, this just talks about when you have too many decisions, you don't actually pick anything. And it's the same thing with AI. When users have ChatGPT and you have, GPT-4o, O1, O3 mini, O3 mini high, the problem is that you have too many choices. When we go over to Claude, we have maybe 3 models. When we go over to Gemini, we have maybe 1 or 2 models that we're going to be using. And in fact, Gemini has probably too many models now. But the point is that like Claude, everyone knows it's Claude 3.6 on it. That's the one model you use. And it's like with DeepSeek, you have the thinking model. That's the basic model that everyone uses. So with this, you've basically got too many choices. So it's quite likely in the future, these are going to be unified into one big model / architecture. So with that being said, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video and I will see you guys in the next one.